How the growing problem with Nebraska basketball that you saw Monday might impact football and other sports too. That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome everybody. It is Tuesday. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic as well. We will indeed have to talk about Nebraska's 49-46 basketball loss last night at home.
Gross.
To Michigan. It was bad. Things are getting a little dicey as far as the NCAA tournament picture is concerned down the stretch here. So we have plenty to talk about in that regard. But let's take what we see on the basketball court and let's kind of blow it up a little bit and make it into a bigger picture topic. You know, I was thinking about this today too, Mitch. They played, so if we're tying it back to basketball, it played a very, very bad offensive game last night, as we'll talk about when we get into the game portion of this. And oftentimes I think people will notice this sort of the lack of chemistry maybe between oftentimes it feels like there's maybe individual players. And sometimes we felt that way in football as well. And so the question that we're asking this morning is this potentially a product of college sports in the way that they are right now, given that so many rosters around the country, both in basketball and football, are products of the transfer portal and how difficult it is today to build a team?
Yeah, the pay for play model. How does it impact college sports? And I think sometimes you can get lightning in a bottle and you can find a transfer who has everything that you're looking for. He fits into your salary structure, just call it what it is, and he's the right piece at the right time to make you win. But it's a totally different kind of challenge that Fred Hoiberg faces, that Matt Rhule faces in building these rosters than existed for their most recent predecessors. For Tim Miles and Scott Frost, when they were the coaches at Nebraska, they worried about finding players out of high school or junior college, or even if they were transferring, who fit into the chemistry of what they were trying to build. Now you worry first about whether you can afford the player, and whether you're on the upper part of the scrap heap looking for players like Nebraska football is, where you have the ability to go out and buy $1 million left tackle, or you're more where Nebraska basketball is, and you kind of have to let things sift through and see who the Auburns and the Arizonas of the world might get, and then you kind of have to take their leftovers. It's more difficult in that situation, or it can be more difficult in that situation to make it all come together. But either way, you're playing a game and you're putting together a roster in such a different way than what existed in college sports 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's part of the reason why we saw and why we see things more often, like what happened on Monday night at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and like what's apparently happening to Nebraska basketball down the stretch of the season that not very long ago looked promising. Like a team that could win in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot in there. It's interesting. I feel like at Nebraska, you sort of have to be a place where you try as hard as you can to discover like these indefinable qualities. But and I think that's a really, really important part of team building. It's certainly what Matt Rhule wants to do. He said as much like out loud before, like they want their edge to be not necessarily in the fact that they have more money than anybody else, or the fact that they, have all these, they like to find edges everywhere, but they know that they have to be really good in the margins and really good at the details. And it's the same thing with Nebraska basketball. But I think what you're sort of referring to for basketball is, hey, you have concepts of a really interesting team here, and you're veteran, and you theoretically like have some leadership and all of those things. And then there's one thing, you don't have a point guard, or there's, whatever else that might ail you in basketball. So it's fascinating. And I think you'll see a lot of that. And you do see a lot of that. I mean, look at the teams around Nebraska right now, like on the bubble in the NCAA tournament, if we're talking basketball. Just they're all flawed in these pretty critical ways. And it's difficult to find if you're in the position Nebraska's in.
I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that last year after the basketball season, and it was a historic season, Nebraska got back to the tournament for the first time in a decade last season. There was to finish third in the Big Ten. There was real hope, I think, going into March, unlike this year that Nebraska I predicted it and I doubled down on it recently, but I don't know that there's all that much hope among the Nebraska fan base and public that this team is going to do the unthinkable and win a tournament game. But there was that hope last year. And I think that after the season, when Fred Hoiberg started to lay things out and go, all right, I need this. Here's how much we have with NIL. Here's the Eli Rice transferred. Jamarcus Lawrence transferred. CJ Wilcher transferred. Like when all that stuff started happening, I'll bet he had a pit in his stomach. And as players came and went in the portal and you missed on some, you get this guy, you get that guy. I bet there was a worry, and there probably is every offseason for every basketball coach and every football coach to varying degrees. Man, is this going to come together? Is this going to work? Like, are we going to be able to do this on the court in February? And he's probably thinking about that in quiet moments right now. Gosh, I remember how I felt in May and in June when I wasn't sure. And it's such a different challenge for a coach now. And I wonder if Matt Rhule, I'm sure he had some of those same thoughts in early December this year when people started hitting the portal and you're dealing with coaches who are leaving. It's such a tough job now. And because of the roster construction piece and the role that the portal plays, and you run the risk of ending up in a situation where you don't have the pieces that come together and form the chemistry that you need to do the things that the fans want. They're like, we're paying a lot of money. We're buying these tickets. We're buying this merchandise. We're supporting this team. And your team out there looks like 8 different parts going 8 different directions. Well, guess why that happens? Look at the off seasons and what a mess it is to try to get a group together.
Yeah, I also think it's incumbent, it falls upon the responsibility on the shoulders of the coaches and the leadership structure, as far as the leaders in the locker room are concerned, to get the most to help get the most out of what you have. And it could be difficult. It could be proven difficult by the fact that you don't have X piece to be able to make it really work how you want it to work. But I think the best teams and the best coaches, they kind of figure out ways to make it work. And you can have fatal flaws, and I think Nebraska does have a couple, but they also have a lot of good things. I mean, they have a lot of things that are working for them as well, and they're a pretty dang good team on defense when they want to figure it out. But that has been, just way too much of a rolling, thing this year, where you just don't know what to expect on a given basis. And then the offense is what the offense is at this point. It's Brice Williams, and it's kind of nobody else. So they have to work around the things that they believe in, and then you kind of build a team off of those things. But to your point, Mitch, it makes it really difficult when you don't really know what the things that you do well are until January, or halfway through the season.
You have to, in a team sport, you have to have pieces that you can build around, like foundational pieces. And I think Nebraska in basketball, well, in football, like that's the quarterback, that's the captain of your defense on the field, your middle linebacker, your top safety, whatever, nose tackle, a game-changing pass rusher. In basketball this year, we saw this fully on display last night. Nebraska has one piece on the court that it can build around. And that was not enough. on Monday against Michigan. Brice Williams was everything for Nebraska. Nobody else scored until more than halfway through the first half, and still Nebraska was right there hanging with Michigan. He finished with 26 out of their 49. It was brutal offensively. Even with Williams, without him, you would have turned the TV off or wanted to walk out of the arena right away. So
Yeah.
You got to have those foundational pieces, and ideally in basketball you got 2 of them or maybe 3 of them.
It's it's definitely difficult. I don't think it's impossible. Like, we don't mean to be huge Debbie Downers or whatever. Like, it's not impossible. There's a lot of coaches, and I do think Nebraska is a place where you sort of have to double down on the idea where you have to find good players, and you have to find players that can match up in the Big Ten, both in football and in basketball. But you also have to double down on the idea that you have to be better than the sum of your parts as a team. Like, so how do you make up that ground if you're not going to be as talented as, because you don't have enough money to compete like Ohio State does? Well, you find these indefinable qualities. You find out what works in your locker room, and you recruit it and you develop it over years. I think having a run, and Nebraska's in it right now in basketball, of 2-year transfers and 3-year transfers really helps. Like, I think that's a really good thing for them. So yeah, Nebraska's got to be that kind of program for sure.
You find guys, and this is not a knock on Fred because they're not just out there growing on trees, but you find guys like Sam Griesel, Nebraska had
great one
a year ago, and you build. It's hard to build around somebody who's going to be in the program for 1 year, but like, you have to. If you're not Duke, if you're not Michigan State, if you're not a team with the ability to get the best of the best in the portal, you have to find players that you can build around who have like that it factor, and it's just a tough deal, and you end up with products on the court, games. Not every week, Nebraska's still in a position to do some good things this year, but you end up with games like what we saw Monday night, 49-46 at Pinnacle Bank Arena. The Huskers dropped to 7-10 in the Big Ten. We're going to talk more football in this show, but before we do that, we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about this game that happened on Monday night, as the 15th ranked Wolverines and their big front line, made up of transfers, by the way, came into Lincoln and walked out as the co-leaders in the Big Ten Conference this season. That's coming up next. But first, as you know from our conversation, March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or you pick less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game going. In the NBA this week, for instance, maybe you want to take a look at Devin Booker for more than 26 points or LeBron James for more than 25. Whatever. You go find those numbers, you're going to get an option to go more or less. I love how you can just make your picks in a minute and stay engaged all game long. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you set your first $5 lineup and watch it play. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, welcome back. Tuesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman. Connor Happer is with me. Let's talk about, for a moment, what actually happened on the court Monday night at PBA and what it means for Nebraska's NCAA tournament hopes. First, Nebraska shot 16 of 62 from the field, Connor. It was 6 of 28 from three-point range, and that's with Brice Williams, who went for 26. Without him, Nebraska did almost nothing other than get a couple of big threes down the stretch from Sam Hoiberg. Yep. Juwan Gary, Burke Buchtengel back in the lineup. Andrew Morgan, Braxton Mia, they basically did nothing offensively against Michigan's big front line of Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden.
Yeah. So much so that Nebraska, it appeared, was maybe afraid to just go inside the painted area. And for good reason. Nebraska was 1 of 7 on layups. I mean, they were horrible just shooting the basketball. They were, I mean, I don't know how analytically driven people that listen to this podcast are, but 0.687 points per possession is absolutely horrendous. And Michigan wasn't much better on the other side. So 16 of 62 from the field, and Brice Williams was 9 of 21. So that's 7 of 41 from the field from people not named Brice Williams.
17.1%.
2 of 19 from 3 by people not named Brice Williams. And 4 of 8 from the free throw line by people not named Brice Williams as well. Like, I mean, just 46 points. I looked it up last night. It took a little bit of digging. 46 points was the lowest since gosh, I have it right here. February 6, 2019 at home against Maryland. Nebraska scored 45 points that night, went 12 of 57 from the field, and Roby made 7 of those shots. So it was basically the same thing, except for Maryland, I think, had 60 that night and won by 15 at Pinnacle Bank Arena. I mean, that was rough. There were some really good things on the defensive side. Nebraska had their energy, but just it did not look disinterested at times at doing anything other than giving the ball to Brice Williams on offense.
So a low point total in the Fred Hoiberg era. Did you hear him? Did you catch the press conference after the game? What did you think of his? I was having a hard time, like in my mind, kind of coming up with like a quick summary of like what his mood was.
Yeah,
I mean, he was steadfast.
I felt like he kind of was. He just chalked it up to, yeah, we just missed shots, kind of that one of those type of things. Which I don't know. Like, your offense is in a rough position right now. He also mentioned a couple times how much they're missing Rink Mast.
Heard that name mentioned.
Absolutely true. Like, they are. And he would have very much helped against 2 7-footers. But it's February 25th, man. You've been missing Rink Mast the whole year. So I felt like that was sort of interesting as well. But yeah, they're trying to keep things on the tracks. That's for sure.
Yeah, Rink would have been helpful. Rink is one of those guys, like I talked about Griesel. Like, he's one of those guys that like makes people around him better. I guess when it comes down to it, that's maybe what Nebraska lacks. Like, who are the players on the court that make? We don't want to make this big gripe about Nebraska basketball, but Rink made people around him better. He does. Maybe he will next year. I don't see that a ton. I mean, Raleigh Worcester, maybe.
They've been able to run their offense through bigs for the Fred Hoiberg 2.0 era, and usually that big was Derek Walker. Last year was Rink Mast, and Griesel had that size at point guard that kind of allowed him to spray it out a little bit as well that year with Bandamel and those guys. So they've always had sort of interesting like athletic matchups at that position, and no doubt his absence hurts him.
It was never more obvious that Andrew Morgan isn't that guy. And for all that he brings to you and how good he's looked at times this season, he was great against Penn State the other night on the road, like the only bright spot for Nebraska against Penn State.
Not quite crafty enough.
Yeah, he's overmatched. Like, you put him out there against the big Russian and Danny Wolf, and like, I mean, he was missing balls, shots, like at the rim. And it's like, well, like, the guy that's standing there defending him is just better than him and bigger, and they're taking his options away. So, and you could see it was frustrating to him, but he was still playing hard on defense. Yeah, I'm probably talked enough about like what we think of where this team's headed and like what their limitations are. Let's end it with a thought about the final 12 seconds. So Michigan's Roddy Gale misses a free throw with 12 seconds to go. It's 47-46. Worcester gets the rebound, outlet to Brice Williams. Looks like he's going to go in and take it to the rim. Nebraska's down 1. he dishes to his Connor Essegian in transition, who's open from three. Essegian at this point and in the whole game did not hit a three on Monday night. The Huskers were 6 of 26 from three at that moment, and Essegian misfires. Michigan gets the rebound, makes two free throws, and Buchtengel gets a good look at the buzzer, but it also was off the mark.
Yeah,
he didn't make a shot.
I didn't have as big of a problem with the Essegian shot as it seemed like many did. Given just like you take the information that you get in the moment and then you try to process it. Like, obviously, in a broad sense, you want Brice Williams with the ball in his hand with the game on the line, down by a point. Like you want him inside the painted area. I understand that, but like I think Michigan they set it up really well. Like they pulled Wolf off of the block on the free throw rebound and just put him back there and basically said, you're not going to get to the rim, or we're going to make it really, really hard for you. And we're going to make this shot contested. And so I think Brice read that and he saw that, and you have your best 3-point shooter with an open shot. And, so I like situationally, I thought that was okay. And like you said, you left yourself enough time to, for them to make 2 free throws and then get another look to tie at the horn. So like, it worked out where you got 2 good shots to either tie or win the game or go ahead in the game, right? And you just missed them both. And that was the story for Nebraska last night in a nutshell.
I mean, the roof comes off that place if Essegian hits the 3. And you're saying, man, that's why you have that guy.
Right.
Like it's a great shot. And, because Brice could have driven to the basket and gotten blocked, or he by Wolf. Like, it's easier said than done to go take it to the hole on the 7-footer. Like, it's right. It's not easy. You would like to see, you'd like to see him because of the fact that he was their only offense on Monday. Like, you'd like to see him be the one to have to miss the shot if you're going to miss it. But it's a tough situation if you're coming down the court, you see an open teammate and it's Connor Essegian, and you're looking at the rim and there's Danny Wolf. So I get it. But anyway, let's close with that, come back and move our discussion into football. There's some stuff going on in football this week on both the recruiting front and some gears starting to turn in Lincoln. We're going to hear from some people in Nebraska football later this week, most likely. Let's come back and discuss some of that in the final segment of this show. That's next.
All right. Sorry about that. Welcome back. It's the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. All right, football wise, we talked about a future Husker and his endeavors on the wrestling mat yesterday, and
we did.
Tyson Terry, certainly awesome for him, where he goes 169-0 in his high school wrestling career, and now will probably redshirt this fall in Lincoln. So let's take a look at another guy not committed to Nebraska. So Jett Thomalla is the quarterback at Millard South, and yesterday he got a nice little bump in the On3 ratings. He's now a 4-star prospect. He's in the top 200 nationally ranked of all players. He is a heck of an athlete, a really good basketball player too. Good size. He's been offered by all the regional offers and continues to pick up steam as far as the power conference football world is concerned. And he's a quarterback. The thing is about quarterback in Nebraska, recruiting it for 2026, which he's a senior this year, or this upcoming year, is that Nebraska already has a quarterback commit, and his last name is Raiola. And there's that you sort of have to deal with right now. But no doubt Thomalla is a guy who's gaining some steam around the recruiting world.
Yeah, I think we're kind of sleeping on him, to be honest. I mean, you're talking about a returning state champ, 6'5", 195. Just got offered by Missouri. Iowa State has offered Thomalla. Look at those programs and what they accomplished just last season. San Diego State, Duke, Washington State have gone after him. I think now is the time where you're going to see those offers really go through the roof too. He, and rankings are not everything, but he is higher ranked now than Zane Flores and Danny Kalen, who were the last two power conference prospect quarterbacks to come out of the state of Nebraska. They were three-star prospects. Nebraska offered both of those players. Flores very late in the process after Matt Rhule got to Lincoln and he was committed to Oklahoma State. Kalen, of course, signed with Nebraska and went into the portal after his true freshman season and is now at Virginia. But Thomalla is regarded higher nationally than both of these players. And as you mentioned, Connor, Nebraska's got Dayton Raiola in this class. I don't feel like Dayton Raiola is the type of player, even the type of prospect who would stand in the way of the Huskers signing two quarterbacks in the next class, if that's something that Nebraska feels like it needs to do. So, yeah, now's the time you kind of have to make that call on a quarterback, another quarterback, if you're going to take one in your Nebraska in this class. But, there's all kinds of other considerations to take into account. Like, is there another guy out there you'd rather have? It doesn't have to be an Omaha kid. And numbers dictate a lot.
Totally.
You can't, if you're not set up to take two quarterbacks in this class, then you don't do it. And Raiola is obviously the guy that they want. Dayton, that is.
Yeah, I mean, look at the quarterback room right now. And you're right, it's a numbers game. You have Dylan Raiola, and then you project that ahead a little bit. Marco Stavila, you have TJ Latifi took in the 25 class. Do you have enough space to take 226 guys? I don't know. We'll see what happens there. And I think this is a conversation we probably need to get used to more and more. I know we've had it a lot in the past where it's kind of a numbers game for Nebraska with a local recruit. And, are you going to get the offer? Or are you not going to get the offer? But the quarterback position, we haven't dealt with it a whole lot. And like you said, the recruiting calendar is so fast now, and we're already so advanced and far down the line before these guys have actually physically entered their senior year of high school. They're pretty far down the line and evaluating, schools have evaluated them and they've been seen. So you kind of have to make a choice in which road you're going to go down. It's going to be really hard to pull a guy like this with the last second offer. Late. So it's kind of now or never.
He's going to commit somewhere, I would think, and in the spring or early summer. That's just kind of the way it goes with quarterbacks. And when you get that, especially when you get up in the 4-star area and you have plenty of offers, like these schools in the SEC and the Big 12 are not going to sit around and wait. And, and they want to build their classes around quarterbacks. So I'd expect that it's going to be fairly short-lived with Jett Thomalla being on the market. And it doesn't look like, unless there are discussions going on right now and Nebraska has a change of heart with the way that it's approached this thing, it doesn't look like they're going to be in the sweepstakes for him. I just feel like the world has changed and the portal has changed this, and it's made it all seem somewhat less important with high school recruits. And I think that's kind of sad. Like you start to lose that connection between a school like Nebraska and the in-state players. Like in the past, we'd be doing a lot of hand wringing about this, and other players in the 2026 class who do or don't have offers from Nebraska within the state. But now it just kind of all seems to be part of that mess that's out there. And you figure, well, these guys are all going to go somewhere, and then a good chance that they're going to be back on the market in a couple of years. So it's the new world that we live in college football. But people should take a look, and if you get a chance to see Jett Thomalla play basketball, or obviously if you have a chance to watch him play football as a senior, he's a rare kind of prospect, especially at that position in this state of Nebraska.
Yeah, and I also want to keep in mind, the quarterback position is just like I kind of explained. It's really difficult. And there's always been a numbers crunch at that position, but generally, I would say it's a shame that it feels like Nebraska is going to be more selective with in-state prospects, even though there is still a relatively low amount of Power 5 prospects that end up, from the state that end up, playing major college football. So that stinks. You want to see those guys playing for Nebraska. But there's been so many circumstances over the years now that have just sort of led to this moment where, number one, it's not a slam dunk anymore. It's not obvious, and number two, it's not a slam dunk that Nebraska's going to give that prospect that offer anyway. So it's there's a lot of stuff that's gone into it over the years.
Yep. Okay. Wednesday on the show, I think we'll have some stuff to discuss about hearing from some voices within the Nebraska football program. Maybe some voices that we've not heard from yet, or are newer to the Huskers. A little tease. I think that that's something that we'll be previewing and then probably reviewing as this week goes along. So look out for that. Remember, we've got our mailbag show at the end of the week on Friday. Never too soon to get those questions in, and we'll be heading into March to talk hoops and look towards spring practice. So all of that's coming up on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.